fun to work with, somebody like you is you get it. You know that this stuff works. You're open to it. And by the way, I don't need the person to be open to it. I can still do the work regardless of whether or not they believe me, because their subconscious is hearing me, and their subconscious is like, good. Yeah. They're not there yet, but like, trust me, the soul is, and we want this. We want this clearing. We want this assistance and this help.
Through interviews from London to Los Angeles, I hope this podcast will inspire you to embrace your wild side. To keep up with my wild adventures, follow me at SusieLindow.com. You can also find me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Enjoy the show. Hello, Wild Riders. Welcome to the Wild Side. I'm your host, Susie Lindow, and we are very lucky to have Trai Cartwright return to the show. Trai Cartwright is a Denver-based filmmaker and teacher, community builder, creative business consultant, and storyteller. She is also a PTSD survivor, psychic medium, and story channeler. There has never been a time in her life when she wasn't fully immersed in stories and the people who tell them. There has never been a time when she wasn't using her special skills to assist people in reaching their potential. From NYU to Chicago to LA and back to Colorado and then Kansas, Trai has followed the call, diving deep into the exploration and development of every kind of storytelling: feature films, documentaries, short films, plays, web series, TV shows, and fiction and nonfiction of every kind. Welcome back to the show, Trai. I'm super excited to get Trai Cartwright in the hot seat again, because I have so many more questions to ask. Actually, Trai, when I was re-listening to our last show, there was so much information that I hadn't even fully comprehended all of your wild experiences, which leads me to what is your definition of wild? But we already explored that last time, so if I may be so bold, come out and say, you are the definition of wild. Seriously, though, I mean, given all these experiences that you've had with having your foot in one world and another, and how you navigate your psychic abilities and how you help others with being able to share your gifts and talents, I would say that you are about as wild as they come. So.
And I feel like I'm on the low bar of all of this, because I've met some much more wild people than me, and I think, golly, I'm glad I don't have to carry all of that.
Wow.
But we all have access to all of this. I guess it's just whatever our tolerance is, maybe, or what we're supposed to be paying attention to hopefully comes through and gets our attention.
That's great. Well, I can't wait to dive into a whole bunch of questions, but do you have any wild stories to kick us off today?
I do. So I was doing a healing for a client a couple days ago, and she'd been having ongoing shoulder issues. And was just asking for some release and relief. And, the idea is if you can clear the energy around an injury, then the body can do what it does. It'll heal itself better, like much better. So that's usually the protocol, is to try to get rid of, whatever's hanging out. And usually one of the things that comes through really clearly for me is if it's an injury that is tied to the same injury that you've had in past lives, I'll actually see the origin of it. So, for example, another client was having ear issues, and her ear wouldn't heal. There was an infection in there. And I immediately saw this spear, like, coming in, an old, like, 4,000 years ago, this spear, like, coming through the back of her head, and being lodged, and that's how she died in that life. And what that basically was telling me is that this poor woman in every single life probably had issues all the way, so the jaw, and like probably headaches and ear issues. And the hope is to, to clear that past life piece, not every single past life, but just go back to the origin source and try to clear that out so that this life, she doesn't have to keep dealing with it. And then in future lives, she doesn't have to keep dealing with it. But that's not the wild story. That's just a protocol, right? So I think all energy healers operate somewhere in that same, whatever we want to call it, methodologies. So the woman with the shoulder injury, I immediately saw like a surgery, and her whole back, that whole part had been opened up. And then what I saw were these little creatures that were like this big, and they were just like tinkering. They were just tinkering with her. And I'm like, well, no.
Oh my God.
Stop that. And I remember them looking up at me like, what? What are we doing? Like, oh, we're so innocent. And it kind of reminded me, I think it's Men in Black. They have like these little tiny aliens, with the big eyes or whatever.
Oh, sure.
They didn't quite look like that, but it was like the same kind of vibe, that they were just tinkerers and they just wanted to know how this worked. And I was like, you gotta go. So
I think I need you to come to my house and tinker a little bit with my body's issues. Get those tinkerers to go away.
And and then we had an interesting, you and I
yes.
had an interesting,
yes.
Yeah. Do you want to speak to that?
Well, okay. In our last show, we went over a lot of different aspects of being a psychic, and I think I mentioned during the show that I had a lot of antiques and things that you said you would never have in your house because energy attaches itself to the objects. Oh my God, my house is filled with antiques. Well, we get off the podcast and we're talking on the phone afterwards, and we got disconnected like 3 times in the call. It was so weird. And yeah, it was very weird.
It was wild.
And, yes, it was very wild. Wild is right. And so Trai said, I think maybe your house needs a cleanse. And I said, when are you available? So what's really interesting about that experience, and I would love to know your take on all of this and what you saw, but my first reaction was, well, then come to my house and walk through the house and cleanse it. But Trai had just recently moved to another state.
Oh, yeah.
and so she's like, oh, no, I don't need to come over there. I can see everything.
I can read it from wherever.
Yes. And she proved that to me. When she first walked in the house, she said, oh, wow, you have a lot of windows. And she's seeing glare, or I don't know, are you seeing glare? Is that how
I'm not looking at the moment? But I do remember the experience of like astral projecting into your house and walking through it. Yeah.
What was that like?
It's this. I suppose if, so for example, if you're a creative person and you see like a painting in your head, then that inspires you maybe to go and try to capture what the feeling of that painting is, or even the particulars of it. We're writers, we will see scenes in our head. If you're one of those people who ever kind of replays movies or something like that in your head, that's all it is it's the exact same toolkit. It just happens to be, somebody's house sometimes.
Yeah, well, that was a real mind-blowing experience for me, since I'd had a banger that had been in my house at one time, and we spoke about that in the last podcast.
Any more banging?
No. No more banging. I know. Yeah. I know. And so that was really huge to get rid of that jerk. And actually people had been here when it happened. It wasn't like I'm just making this up. So that was one of the things. But what was interesting to me was, there was a lot of things that were interesting. I think I want to start with how you had a helper. Remember your helper, the construction dude that kind of popped up and started telling you about stuff in my house that I should check on?
Yeah. So this happens a lot. Some have tons of helpers, just in general, and whether we sort of recognize that we're getting information from them, or if we just get information and assume that it's our, our own genius or common sense, quite frankly. Well, it's just common sense to go move my car, Like,
Right.
There's a storm coming, so I'm going to move my car. And then the next morning you wake up and there's a tree that, is a parking lot or parking space. Like, you can either say that was a helper telling you move your car, or, you could say, well, it just made sense for me to move my car, right? Like, well, no matter what. So we're always like in that space anyway, taking in our helpers' tips. So usually, and there's like I don't want to call it a hierarchy because just everybody has different functions and different motivations. And by everybody, I just mean everybody who's on, the different planes. So sometimes you'll have your spirit guides or, archangels, and they're feeding you the information that is part of their purview. But I also get a lot of people who have passed who have like an attachment to land or a property or a person or, antique furniture, for example.
Yeah.
And then it's usually their interests are in that specific thing, right? So if they're a family member, they want to talk about the family and they want to talk about the family relationships. They're not going to come in and talk to you about, well, you're thinking about, I don't know, a big move, and I just wanted to let you know there's going to be a natural disaster in 5 years. So like take that, like that's not what they do. They're mostly just there to be supportive. Hopefully, right? Every now and again you get a banger who is just ornery and just wants attention. So what came through at your house was there had been somebody who had done a bunch of work. I think it was the original. You said you thought, the way I described him, you thought he was talking about like the retaining wall in your backyard,
yes,
or something like that?
Yes, which was interesting because he said be careful of water damage and that wall falling down. And actually last summer we found that whole thing is starting to crumble. So yeah, he was spot on that.
Oh, so did you go ahead and do some work on it, or is that going to be a 2024 project?
That will be a summer project.
Okay.
It's just too hard to work on anything right now in winter.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I heard you got like 1.5 feet of snow.
Yeah, I know. It's so much snow today.
I'm not there for it.
Yeah. It's crazy today. I keep expecting the power lines to go down. And if it does, we will resume our session. But the other thing that this guy said was that during our next rainstorm that we should check the highest point in our roof and make sure it isn't dripping up there.
Yeah. I remember that. Yeah. Did you get up in the attic? Did you have a look around?
We haven't had any rain yet. I guess we could have last night.
Although, like,
we could have
melt with.
Yeah, if it melts, yeah, we'll have to check on that. And then, but the most interesting thing that he said, remember, about the basement. They were super pissed. The house is super pissed about what we've done with our unfinished basement. It's like a hellhole. It's like where all of my extra junk comes to die. It's like. So he was suggesting hanging pictures and selling half the stuff and getting everything in containers. Treating it with respect, making it like a regular room. That was really surprising to me.
Right. So
that's definitely
this is a good tip for anybody. Like anytime you have, I really hate going to storage unit places. And I've had them off and on. A lot of us do. And I would hate to go to mine because it's like I could feel the energy of like all of these lives that had been, packed down into these spaces. It just always feels like incredibly dense. And a lot of times people, they'll have storage units because, there's a whole range of reasons, but sometimes it's they can't let go of things, so they just get a storage unit so that they don't have to deal with the fact that they can't let go of things. But then that not let going energy is now in the storage unit. Or, you know, people hit hard times and they need to downsize, you know, so when they pack that stuff away, they might be sad about packing it away because they're struggling at the moment. And all of that energy ends up in our stuff. Or, you know, you inherit a bunch of stuff and you don't know what to do with it. And then all of the energy from all of the lives that stuff, you know, your parents, your grandparents have held. So there's just, I don't like antique stores. I don't like estate stores. I don't like storage units. And your basement was chock-a-block. So I hope that that's another summer project.
Oh my God, you have no idea. I think that there's two reasons why I do it. Number one, I always think I'm going to find a use for it later, and I don't want to have to buy it again, which really, that bums me out, and I have had to do that. The other thing is, I don't want to make the decision. It's procrastination. Sometimes you need enough distance from things to be able to stand back and say, oh yeah, that holds no value for me anymore. If it's too close to you, if you just recently set something aside, you're not really sure how you feel about it. And then I love the Marie Kondo thing. Okay, does it give you joy? You know, like anything that's not doing anything or is in neutral, it's going in a big sale. So contact me if you're looking for antiques this summer. I have a lot of stuff I'm getting rid of.
I bet you can find an estate person to come and give some pricing, you know. But I wanted to speak to this idea of so you were doing the energy separations, but you know, you're doing them really slowly. And then at some point it stops occupying any kind of, you know, space in our heads that we remember to keep making our separations from that thing. Lots of times it'll happen not for people where, like, if you pull open a garage and you're like, oh my God, I forgot I had that, then you have major energetic separations, and now's a great time to send that on down the road. You know, whatever that is. Right. But then a lot of people will go into their garage and just be like, oh, I remember the memories. Oh, I remember, you know, fills them up again with. So this is how we get hoarders, unfortunately, is, you know, all of that energy is just so in their space and they can't separate. And I get frustrated at those shows because they do the cosmetic thing, you know, they empty out the house and they clean it up and they make it safe, you know, and hygienic again. But what they haven't done is done any work on the energetic level for these people. So all they feel is grief and loss and invasion and betrayal. Like, so, you know, this is not a good thing as far as they're concerned. But if they had, I don't know, an energy healer working with them to clear that energy out up on the, you know, the etheric level, then when they looked at what was happening, they would be able to look at it from a more, you use the word neutral, that's a great word, from a more neutral stance, and then be able to make their decisions about whether or not they're really angry at their kids for doing it.
Oh my God. So would you do that before or after the intervention?
You know, you can, okay, so it's never recommended to work on somebody without their permission or their awareness. It doesn't mean you don't do it. So there's a guy that I learned a lot about dowsing, which is when you have, you know, a pendulum and you use it to give you yes or no's or, you know, whatever it is that you're working on. And he's outstanding, one of the best in the nation, a guy named Raymond Grace. If dowsing is of interest to you, he's your guy. And he says, look, I do a bunch of work on prisons. You know, I do work on, you know, places that are, you know, like bars that have a lot of fist fights, right? Any places where there's a lot of conflict. And he's like, I'm not getting their permission. I'm not asking the prisoners if it's okay for me to, like, clear their energy. I'm just doing it. And, you know, he's had these amazing results where even without the permissions, he's gone in and he reduces the violence level of places. Wow. You know, he reduces, he cleared this is not people, but it's a place where there was a 4-way stop that just kept having, God, like a dozen or more car crashes every single year, and it was just becoming notorious. And when he looked at it, he's like, well, yeah, because there's a lot of, like demonic energy, like hanging out in this space, causing this chaos. So he just released the energy, no more car accidents, just like that. So, when you're blocked, and it doesn't matter what the block is, but when you're blocked, if your first response is to be like, okay, it's not just an emotional thing that I need to work on, it's also, there's weird energy around, not weird, all energy is weird as far as I'm concerned, but, if I can, and weird in the old, would that be Celtic sense, like the weird sisters, it's what to call witches, the weird sisters.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So all energy is WYRD, weird. Anyway, so if you clear it on an energetic level, then when you come back to actually manage the thing, it's just so much easier. It doesn't mean there's not still like some stuff emotionally, but you're going to have more distance from it. All of a sudden, whatever the stuff was that was kind of holding you up is just looser. And sometimes it's a single clearing and you're all good and you're like, sweet, never have to deal with that again. And sometimes you have to kind of go back to it, which I think frustrates people, where they think that there ought to be a magic wand thing. Well, you're magic, fix it. Oftentimes we're human. We backslide. We have habits. We have patterns. We have programming. And sometimes you have to and sometimes you clear one level of programming and there'll be another level of programming that was reinforcing the same exact thing, but you couldn't see it until you got rid of this, and then you got to get rid of this. So it can be kind of annoying. And I think like the woman with the back pain, she felt great at the end of that healing. And those little critters aren't going to come back. It was for agreement that they were done futzing around and to go back, from whence they came. But that doesn't mean that there's not another layer of upset, in her shoulder that may be not associated with those little fey creatures. Does that make sense?
Yes. And actually, the more I learn about this, the more excited I get to have you do another session with me.
Because it's fun too, right?
It is.
Learning all these things. You're like, I knew that.
I know. When it resonates, it's so crazy. Yeah. But that brings me to next step in that house cleanse, that there were little energies around the house. A funny one was the one you found in my bathroom. You said, oh, there's a room with wainscoting. And I said, oh, you said, oh, well, it could be just the way this entity is projecting themselves in something old-fashioned. Like, no, I have a wainscoted bathroom. and nice. So you were able to find this little creature and asked you to describe it. And you said it had like spiky energy where the head would be, or above the head or whatever, and it was small. But it was, you asked it to leave, but it didn't want to leave because he didn't want to leave his friends. And I was like, friends? What do you mean? He's got more friends here? Oh my God. Do I have how many people are sharing this space with me, Or probably a lot. Right. So anyway, but you finally got rid of that energy. And then, do you remember the really negative energy, my banger, the one that's been hiding things on me forever? Oh my God, I'm still finding stuff after that. After
really?
You did.
Oh
yeah.
Gosh, I'm happy to hear that.
I know. I was looking for these pictures forever, and I found them in a place I cleaned out. There's no way I could wipe off a shelf and not find pictures, right? So I mean, definitely things are still popping up, yeah. But that one, you said that this particular entity had been either a brother or a father in past lifetimes, and that
that's right.
He had tormented me and bullied me because I called him out, which is probably
Oh my gosh, that's right. Yeah.
And the thing was, that so resonated with me because I won't always stick up for myself in situations, but I've gotten into a lot of trouble for sticking up for other people in situations where I'm like, you have to stop. That is not okay. And I'm just that person. And I guess I did that really long time ago and was not forgiven by this entity through millennia and beyond. And you finally bid it farewell. But I got to tell you, you said that you visualized him standing above an overlook or a stairway. And I kept thinking, well, outside I have like a deck, and he could be standing on the deck. And I'm like, no, that's not it. You said, is it central to the house? And oh my God, we have a circular stairway. And there's wrought iron. And you said, oh, there's wrought iron there. Yeah, there's wrought iron right there. So every time I walk past that place, I'm like, be gone, be gone.
Good. And that was part of what's fun to work with, somebody like you is you get it. You know that this stuff works, you're open to it. And by the way, I don't need the person to be open to it. I can still do the work regardless of whether or not they believe me, because their subconscious is hearing me, and their subconscious is like, good. Yeah. They're not there yet, but like, trust me, the soul is, and we want this. We want this clearing, we want this assistance and this help. But with you, it's like, fun, because it's like, what about this? And have you seen that? And one of the things I remember telling you was that because he had such deep ties, soul ties with you, that it was something that you needed to be mindful to never like invite him back in, because sometimes energies, we give them the opportunity to return, whether we mean to or not. So I love that you're being like, nope, my space, you don't belong here. Carry on.
So how do I avoid that? Like,
not be human?
Yeah, I know.
We just do it. Yeah. Like, people we miss, we think about them, and we can kind of energetically like feel them, in our heart. And, when we do that, we're actually kind of casting a tie back to that person. People call them cords. And then now you're in their space, and we don't mean to. They crossed our mind, and and if it's positive stuff, then we're sending them, loving energy. But if it's somebody that hurt you or you have unresolved stuff with, then you're actually sending that same, kind of downer energy at them. So part of what a lot of us try to be mindful of doing is just, if I find myself doing that, like, I'll stop myself and then I'll kind of clean it up, because I didn't mean to send that energy to them. So I take it back.
Well, and also, a lot of thoughts come to mind. One time I was speaking with someone on the phone, and we were talking about their relatives, and then it was so weird, but all of a sudden, just like I started spewing. I'm impulsive, so I spew all the time. But in this case, I don't know where it came from. It was like, don't speak ill of the dead. I kept saying that. I said it like 3 times, and I'm like, oh shit. Like, I probably shouldn't have said this to this person, but this was coming from them, and they were just saying, quit talking about me behind my back. But that's such an old adage, and I'm sure that it comes from these kinds of experiences where, don't piss off these people who can hide stuff on you, or make your life hell in your house. You want your car keys, you're late for something? Good luck.
Good luck. So you're trash talking me over here.
Yeah, I don't want to do that.
Yeah, like, I feel like you were channeling something.
That's how I felt.
You, right? It was between whoever had these things, this message that they needed to convey, and them. And then you're like stuck in the middle, and you're like, I didn't ask for that. That's so rude. Stop it. Don't use me as a channel.
I know it was really, and I also felt really, very uncomfortable after I got off the phone. But this person doesn't really believe in any of this stuff anyway, so it just would go, right over their head. But I like the idea that our subconscious is aware of all these things, which also makes me think, what you have to remember is that when people were especially since talking to you and all of this, that we're on this earth with all these foibles and things that we've chosen to work through or whatever. Like, we're human, but we're more than human. We have major problems we're supposed to fix while we're here. At least that's what I believe. And so you have to remember that their like soul essence or whatever they are on the other side is different than however they appeared in life with us, right? I mean,
Right.
do you agree with that? And so it's not really fair to hold a grudge with people who've already passed on because they're no longer that entity, or they would present differently, wouldn't they, in another lifetime?
Yeah, it really depends. So there's, in many traditions, in many death traditions, there's the idea that for some folks, the progression of the soul out of the body back to wherever takes some time, and in some cultures it's like 3 days. Jewish people sit Shiva for 5 days because that's their belief, that they're there to keep the soul company while it figures out that it's time to move on. And if it's a peaceful passing, then the soul can cross over like immediately because they're at peace to move on. And that's part of one of the big goals. You hear gurus talking about this, that when they leave, they just want it to not be traumatic at all because they know where they're going. There's nothing to be afraid of. It's going to be awesome. And they can make that transition. But if you're afraid of death, it's going to be kicking and screaming, right? And
Wow.
this is the whenever you look at any kind of community or religious or social traditions where you're made to be afraid of death, they're not doing you any services at all. Because there isn't anything. There is no hell. There is no hell. So, let it go, right? But to get to the place where you can let go, and a lot of people can't, and not only does the soul really reluctantly leave the body, but it doesn't want to leave this world. And that's when we get attachments to, this ball, or it doesn't, but just as an example, right? Yeah. So this goes back to our original conversation about taking on other people's artifacts because, I don't know what's attached to it, and I've dealt with haunted objects before, and it's unpleasant, and, you have to get rid of the artifact, and I try to clear the artifact and release the thing because they don't know that they don't want to be there, but maybe they're angry, maybe they're territorial. There's all kinds of reasons for something to, like that banger, who knows? And frankly, who cares? It's but this is not your world. Move on. Right. That brother figure, and increasingly I'm convinced it was a brother. This is a big, long past life thing, and it's hard to reconcile an interpersonal relationship that isn't even on this plane. It's hard enough to deal with relationships on this plane, much less all of that stuff. So he was sticking around partly because he had beef with you. So we never know what stage things are in, but everybody always has the option. And this is one of the things that I do when I clear, is I give them the option to go into the light. Find the light. It's beautiful. That is an option for you. If you're ready to let go of whatever's been going on, go into the light. You'll never have to deal with it again. And so many of them are like, oh, thank goodness. Because they can finally set down these really mundane, stupid human things. And then you never hear from them again. Not never. Then there's the folks so there's also a lot of societies that have very strong ancestor ties. And their belief is that their ancestors are looking out for them and that they can, help create good fortune for them and give them respect. If you're respectful towards them, they will help you out. So Day of the Dead, so there's the Latino rituals. In Asia, they have altars that are all about giving respect to the ancestors. So these are now, they've already crossed over, and they're no longer human. But when you call on them, it's like they can form back into the energy of who they were when they were here, but it's temporary. They're doing it just to have this conversation and to do this thing with you, and then they're immediately going to go back into the ether and, and not be human anymore, because none of us are human, as it turns out.
That's so interesting. You were talking about objects, and that was another thing that we discovered when you were in my house, psychically. You said, there's a room, you have a teapot in a corner of a room. And oh my God, literally this room has corners. And there's an old tea tray, with the wheels and everything. I had his whole tea set on that tray. And you said, you need to get rid of that. You can buy something better. You can afford it. Get rid of that thing. I was like, holy crap, I picked that up and took it out to the garage.
Good job.
And put it way as far away as I can until I can sell it.
That's not getting rid of it. That's just moving it to another place in your house. No, you got to get rid of it, dude.
I have to, I haven't been around. I have to deal with that this afternoon.
and don't go taking it to a Goodwill or an estate place. Like, then
I have to bury it
on the crappy energy to somebody else.
I have to bury it.
You can bury it. Sometimes that'll work. There's lots of different ways to clear artifacts, and sometimes it's as simple as, doing some, getting some sage or some Palo Santo, smoking it. Sometimes that's enough.
Okay.
Sometimes, whenever I get a new crystal, sometimes you could just leave it outside. Like, if there's a new moon, oh my God, fantastic. Use the new moon energy.
Oh, yeah. I heard about that.
Let the moon do the clearing. Some people feel like water. If you have a moving water in your area, put it in the stream. Salt. This is the thing that I always use because I lived in cities and didn't have access to any of this. Except for the moon. But I didn't really have a yard, and I felt like if I put it on my windowsills or whatever, it's not going to be there in the morning. So I would just bury it in salt and let the salt take it on, and it'd be really gratifying because sometimes there's so much energy in it that when you return to the salt 24 hours later and you touch it and it's hard.
You're
like,
God.
Ooh, the salt did its job.
Now I want to do it just to do the experiment.
Yeah, and you should clear out, if you keep crystals, I have tons and tons of crystals.
I do.
Just for fun. I don't know what they mean. I just buy them because they make sense to me. But I will, I'll set them out at least every year, and I should probably do it more, but I'll either do a moon bath or a salt thing or something, to clear them out. Because they're pulling in all the bad juju in our house. But at some point they reach capacity, so you got to let it go. But this also works for objects that has, sorry, my dog is present and accounted for. She's
good.
This also works for objects that if you feel weird about an object, there's probably some energy attachments to it. So it can't hurt to set it out on a new moon and see if you can clear it out, or sometimes it's more. Did I ever tell you this story where, I'm a professor, and sometimes my students will give me gifts at the end of their time with me. And it's incredibly sweet. And this really lovely, lovely person I got to work with gave me a bag of books related to the subject. And she had made me some jewelry. It was really, really super thoughtful. And I'm going through the bag, and I find this one book that was tracking all of the mysterious and horrific deaths having to do with the thing that we studied. And I immediately was like, I don't want this. This is gross. Why would you think that this would be something I'd be interested in? And I just had this immediate revulsion to it. And I remember thinking, I just want to throw it in the dumpster as I leave. I just want it. I'm just going to throw it away. And then I thought, oh my gosh, but what if one of the other students sees me dumping this gift? That's so rude. So I brought it back I was staying in a hotel for the thing, and I was like, oh my God, why did I bring it in my hotel? Because now it's in my world and it's on my stuff. And I ended up bringing it back to my apartment, and And it was just so much negative energy. And, you know, I was behaving in ways like you were talking about spewing, where you're like, you know, don't talk ill of the dead. I got kind of mean for a while, and I'm like, this is not me. This is not me. What is this? Oh, it's that frickin' book. I should have listened to my guides who told me, put it in the dumpster, get rid of it, don't take it home with you. So I put it outside, and I started, and I had like a little stream in my little area. I put it out under the moon. I put it next to the running water. I did the smoke stuff, and it was still messing with me. It was still there. I could feel the energetic nastiness, and it was pretty nasty on it. So I would put it in a bag with a bunch of salt, and it was so weird. So the more I escalated, the more the book rebelled. And I would go out in the morning and open the bag, and it would be sopping wet. Like where did that water? And it wasn't. I don't live in a place where that's condensation, where that's just a naturally happening event. So now I'm pulling the book apart and drying out the pages, and hoping that the sun will come help me. And I'm calling in archangels. Like now I'm like, oh my God, what the heck is this thing? This is bad. So finally I got it all dry. So now it's gone on for weeks. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous how long it took. It doesn't take me that long at all anymore. Like I can do it now in a day or less. So finally I was like, you know what? I'm going to burn you. Which, by the way, is the last resort. Like this is, or it could be the first resort if you have a safe way to burn things. So in a lot of Wiccan traditions, witchcraft traditions, people will say, write down your wishes that you want to let go of, the things that you're done with, the things that are no longer serving you, and you write it on a piece of paper, and then you burn it, and it releases that energy, right? It's a way to let go of things. So it's the exact same thing. So here I am. It was very, very comical. I couldn't stop laughing. I had gone and gotten some kerosene or propane or whatever you use on barbecues, and I didn't have a barbecue, so I went to the local park that had one of those, like in a big pad. and one of those big metal things, and I just page by page I just started burning this thing, and it wouldn't burn, Susie, and it was taking forever, and it's 6:00 in the morning because I didn't want to attract attention to myself. Oh no, not the crazy person burning a book in the park, right? And it's so funny because Denver is such nice people. They're just like looking at me, and I'm like, good morning, and they're like, good morning. Nobody said a thing about the fact that I was burning this book in the park at 6:00 in the morning. And then the sprinklers came on, and I was like, oh, don't you dare, you're not getting out of this, like you're burning today. And the sprinklers literally came within like 6 inches of the fire pit. And then they didn't, and it took me 2 hours to burn this freaking book. But
with lighter fluid? You use lighter fluid.
Yeah. Yep.
How? That's crazy. Because that stuff, anybody who has ever worked with a barbecue, lighter fluid is magical. Yeah. It just...
Yeah, not this book. It was fighting me every step of the way, but in the end, it was released, and it stopped messing with me. But the damage was kind of done. It ended up being this huge distraction, and and it made me not myself for a while. So that's another thing. If you find yourself just not behaving, like if you've bought something at an estate sale, sorry to keep like picking on other people's stuff. Because, we want to recycle, right? We want to upcycle things. It's good to pass on the things that you no longer, find joy in. But clear it. Like, clear that energy before you incorporate it into your world. And then if you find yourself behaving differently than you normally do, if you're kind of depressed or... angry or just, I don't know, like different than your usual, or if you're really, really nice, like normally you're
a bitch.
You're very, very nice. Be like, this isn't me. Whose energy is this?
Let's get rid of that. I'm not a happy, nice person.
Right. How dare you? How dare you interfere
with my evil streak?
So that's one of my favorite stories because it was just me having this weird little adventure with this nasty little, and I know that it manipulated my student into buying it, like I know that it wanted to go mess with people. And it had been in the discount bin. Like, it was the only one of its kind. And it was like, $1.50. And nobody was buying it until my student, who's kind of witchy herself, picked it up.
So I have a question about that. So I was going to ask you if this was a brand new book and if the words themselves were the things that made you feel weird, or if it had been owned by somebody who had put their negative energy. So it was that. It was just like a used object.
Yeah. Like, I hate the idea of a book, like, just coming off the press. Like, I'm sorry, if Clive Barker's books aren't haunted, then that's not a thing. But on the other hand, I listen to folks who study Sanskrit, and the whole idea there, and the Torah, it's the same thing, these ancient texts, that the more you say the words out loud, the more power is imbued in those words. So by the time you come along and say those words, you're not just infusing it with, like, your energy when you say these words, you're also pulling the thousands of years of other people. Wow. Using these mantras, using these benedictions, these blessings. This is where the power, in my mind, this is where some of the real power in some of these ancient traditions comes from, is from these words.
That's interesting, because it makes me think about my Catholic upbringing, and when I would go to church and come out of it feeling really good, like physically, it was because, and I guess I always kind of innately knew this, that it was because so many people, you can't pray, or you can't listen or whatever and think about something else. Of course, everybody spaces out in church, but I'm just saying that
you're meditating. It's actually
everybody's meditating. It's a 1 hour meditation, and regardless of how you feel about traditional religions, which I hate to say on camera, but I've sort of stepped back from. But I and that may be temporary, but for right now, that's the right thing for me. I really feel like there's a lot of good in it. I think there's something you can get from being with a big group of people, that all that energy going in. I mean, just the idea of going to a place and praying, is a super positive thing.
Even just the vessel of the church. I'll go into churches when there aren't services. I'm not a person who, has any particular Christian, not any particular, I have no Christian affiliations. But, like, I love going into churches, and the older, the better, because it's holding that energy. It's holding space for you, It's beautiful.
And we just went to Italy last fall, and you could feel it. You just walk into those places, and you get all of the senses. You get the amazing impact of all this art, and whether it's really old and it's primitive, or it's really beautiful and just covered in paintings and artwork and every kind. It's the scent of the incense that is just in the walls. I mean, it's all of the people who've come and gone, and all of their prayers. Mm-hmm. I wondered, do you ever feel like after, this is a segue, after a world event of some kind, and when people reach out and they're praying, like there's a lot of people out there and they're just reaching for anything. Have you ever had any experiences after that where you've picked up on some of that energy after an event?
9/11 was really hard. But I just thought it was because, I'm an American. And this was this very, very foreign thing. We'd had domestic terrorism, but we'd never had, global terrorism like that before. I'd lived in New York, so I had kind of written it off to my personal affiliations. And I remember my sister and I, we kept wanting to go back to New York, and she's like, well, we need to go see the World Trade Center. And we kept putting it off. My sister is like super, super psychic too. And we kept putting it off, and we finally went, and we realized why we went, because if we had gone any sooner, the blast furnace of the grief and the horror and the destruction would have just flattened us. And even then when we went, we didn't last for very long. It was unbelievably hard to be there. The World War, or the military cemetery on Sepulveda in Los Angeles, I used to have to drive past it to get to a certain place, and I hated it. And usually, cemeteries are my friends, because, hey, everybody.
Hey, buddies.
But there was such... if you were lucky enough to die of other things, right? You get to old age or whatever it is, that's one feeling. But to go to the areas where it's the people who died in combat, super freaking hard. October 7th, the beginning of the Israel Hamas conflict. Holy Toledo, that was a bad day. And it may be part of what I ought to be doing is focusing, because there's so many people who are working up on, a lot of people call it like the Christ grid, where they're working globally to improve the energy of places. But it's almost like, you have to go find that church, you have to go find that vessel, you have to go find that space, that holy space where people are doing the good energetics. To connect to that. But I can't, isn't that sad? I can't really think of, because I don't do crowds, God knows. But that shouldn't matter. Gosh, Susie, you got me stuck. I'll have to think on that.
I have one.
Yeah, tell me.
So after Haiti, remember Haiti?
Oh, gosh, yeah. Oh, my gosh.
Okay. So...
And it's almost at this point, like, which time? But this was the flood. You're talking about the flood in,
yes.
What was it, 2012, I want to say?
That was earlier, I think.
Okay.
It could have been 2012. Anyway, I get nervous talking about this stuff because people, of course, this is a safe space with the world. Go ahead and judge me. So I had it was back when I was, people were walking through my room all the time, and I was seeing entities
people were walking through.
Yeah, they're just walking through, and I could never predict it. It was like once every couple of weeks, and then it wouldn't be for 6 months or whatever. It all kind of started, in 2000 or something like that. But anyway, I woke up in the middle of the night to a sound. It sounded like a shovel scraping against stone, and I thought, that can't be. It must be like a paper bag, like somebody just taking a paper bag and making a sound. And I woke up and I looked around the room, and at that point, I just saw, saw like shadows, but I couldn't really make anything out. I couldn't really, and I thought, well, that's weird. I don't know what those shadows could be. Maybe there's something wrong with my eyesight or whatever. And I was seeing something, but I couldn't really figure it out. And then I fell back to sleep. And the second time I woke up, it was so trippy. And this is before I knew there were LED emergency lights that are on. I had to look it up. I looked it up years later, what I saw. It was blue lights in this, like a square, like a rectangular form. They were projecting right at me, and then there were people digging, and they were right at the end of my bed, and then and I went, what the heck was that? And I would always grab my husband. It's not sleep paralysis. I would grab my husband, Danny, look! And by that time it would disappear. It's gone. Because I can only see these things for a couple of seconds between the half light, and then my brain goes, this isn't possible. You're just imagining things. You're dreaming. So we're going to destroy this image. I can't see stuff when I'm totally conscious. I just can't. So anyway, that's when I found out the next day about Haiti, and I went, oh my God, I had those poor people. They were digging their relatives out. Well, then, I think it might have. It was either, this is a while ago, so I don't know if it was the same night or a couple nights later that I woke up and there was a black boy who was just looking at me, and behind them there were people. And that might have been, like, I'm trying to remember, that might have been the last image that I saw, was that the people were shoveling and he was looking at me. That's what it was. It wasn't a third thing. There were only the two things, and it was just all in that one night. And I just felt like he was praying for a loved one. And because I was sensitive at the time and really open to everything, because I didn't know what I was seeing or, what all this stuff was, that I just tapped into it. So, I just passed on his prayers. I just prayed. It was a terrible thing.
Well done.
But this is a really weird part, which you can take or leave. That next week, and this is back when I had cleaning people, I was walking into my bathroom and there was mud splattered across the door. And my bathroom door is white. It's painted white. It just goes right off our master bedroom. Our master bedroom, I live in a big house, is as far away as you can get from the outside. Mm. And I'm on a second floor. It's like, how? And I remember my cleaning people came in and they cleaned it before I could take a picture of it to prove to anyone. I was like, oh no, nobody will ever believe me. But I feel like that was supposed to happen and that I wasn't supposed to have any proof. But yeah, that was like super weird. That was probably the weirdest thing that ever happened to me. And
that's pretty darn weird, Susie. That's wild.
I know. And then I shut it all down in 2013, and nothing ever happened since. So I don't know. Anyway.
I wonder if the clock that you saw was the time of the earthquake. Is that what you're talking about?
It wasn't a clock. It was the lights. I didn't see a clock.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought I heard you say numbers. It was just LED lights.
It was LED lights. Oh, yeah. They were blue, and they were emergency lights. And then, like, a year or two later, I looked it up online, and I went, what do emergency lights look like? And then I saw that, and I went, I really was seeing that. It was super bright, like, really, really, like, hard to look at bright.
Wow.
In my room. So, I mean, I've always been the first one to dismiss everything. I'm as skeptical as I am a believer, but at the same time, like I said, I shut all this down. I'm not seeing anything anymore. I kind of miss it in a way, but I got to be careful what I ask for.
There's ways to control, to bring it in ways that are, the way you want it to come in. But it's mindful. You have to. There's tricks, there's methodologies, because lots of people have, and I think that this is what, especially America was riding on for so long, because we wanted to reject everything that was magical in the forming of this country. And I have lots of thoughts about that, but, this whole idea of like the witch trials is only a scant, few generations away from these people practicing these, I don't even want to call it like spiritual tenets. So, using plants for medicine is how humans have survived a lot of things for 10,000 years. So right. For people to be like, you gave us a potion and it worked, you're a witch. Well, yes. Also, that's what it's there for. Like, of course we're using the plants, to cure ourselves and to help ourselves. So there's such weirdness in this country about, and part of me thinks, and I think you and I've had this conversation before, that it was part of, in establishing a good firm patriarchy, because the women tended to be the medicine people, and the midwives, and that's wild and weird, and how do you control that? And, just very, very fear-based stuff. So we've been taught from the beginning that we're like the things that naturally that all humans have. It's not just women who can do this stuff. Dudes can do it too. They just work a lot harder and earlier at shutting it down because, they get told to shut down their emotions. And the emotions are often the way that this stuff, the reason why we care. Like we care about things, therefore we're sensitive, therefore we are open to that plane, as well as things like being able to read people's faces, or listening to a voice and being able to understand that they're saying one thing, but something else is going on. Women have all of these kind of soft skills that we've had to develop because we haven't been allowed to work on, more overt planes. Like, you can't have jobs. Good luck.
Right.
And I know I'm being like super reductionist about it, but America doesn't appreciate magic. And it's not magic. It's human. It's just being human. But to them, it's a magical thing to be able to do the things that you do. So we learn early. I mean, I shut it down for a long time. You shut it down for a long time. Many of my friends made that choice where they didn't know what to do with it. There wasn't any guidance around it. You can't go to the library and buy books about this stuff. Lots of towns don't have witch stores where you can at least start reading, some Wiccan stuff to get a sense of it. And this is Winnie down here. If it's a visual thing you're watching,
Hello,
this is my dog. And she's like, I'm getting impatient. So
anyway. I do have a question. So I think that actually people are getting more interested than ever in manifesting and in kind of this magical sense. There's a lot of stuff going on right now.
It really is.
There is. And part of it is just like this reawakening. I think people are realizing, hey, we're all energy, and we're responding to energy all the time in this kind of virtual reality thing we call life. And I think the first time I read The Secret, like everything I put out there, I won everything. Like everything. I won a $15,000 ski trip. I went on a heli trip to British Columbia because I knew I was going to win it. Oh my God, I win everything. I went to a luncheon and they had door prizes. I'm like, okay, what do you want to win? I pick out, this. I'll win this. And then I went with somebody who bought my ticket. So I said, oh hey, here I'll buy the lottery ticket or the raffle because you're going to win because I win everything. And she won. We both won. I had such a streak. And then I don't know if I talked to you about this. Yes. I talked to you about this in 2013 when I got breast cancer. That's me in that picture back there from my boob reports that I did these funny stories on my blog, Susie Lindau's Wild Ride. And I was pissed and I felt, oh, I'm not lucky. I don't have any luck. And my luck stopped. Like all of it stopped. Oh, it was bad, me. Poor. And you said, you need to change the narrative. That's what you told me. I did a psychic reading with you a year ago when I had laryngitis. I wasn't able to make a peep for an entire, I don't know how long it was, 2 hours or something. And that was one of the things. And so I realized that, you say that stuff, you put that out into the universe, they say, oh, sure, we'll make sure that you don't have any good luck. But anyway, my feeling from what I read on the internet, what people are putting out there on social media, is that younger people especially are more in tune with energy and with manifesting and with believing in things that aren't necessarily traditional religious beliefs. And
for sure.
And then this brings me to another question which you may not be aware of, or you may be very aware of, is that whole Jupiter orbit thing. Have you heard about
I'm not. I follow astrologers, but I don't. I
Okay.
don't hold it in my head. I kind of take the general lesson for the week. Is this a good week to move forward on stuff, or is this a week to rest? Like that's kind of. So I don't. Yeah, I don't. I don't have any insight into that.
What and how do you do that? Did you have a birth chart done? Is that how you do
Oh,
that?
sure. No, I have. So part of my big deep dive study that I did and I feel like I'm still in it, 3 or 4 years of it. Astrology was always something that I believed in, but for no particular reason, and now they're like, because science, because, it's true.
Right.
So that was nice to get that, to finally have people realize that it's another tool that's available. It's not magic. It's a tool.
Right.
So I listened to a lot of different people, and then I honed it down to some folks that I have particular faith in, that it resonates with me. It may not resonate with other people, but these are my people. And one of them is, really, really, really wants to pay a lot of attention to, I'm just going to call it the politics of the time, what's happening in our societies. And then the other one is very much doesn't pay attention to the news and is just looking at things from the universal. And I like the dichotomy of the two. Yeah, but I can't remember it's a big thing. We're in the middle of big, 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 big things, and 2024 apparently is going to continue to be really difficult. But then on the far side of that, things will start to resettle and reorganize, and apparently, just get through 2024 and everything will be different, and then we'll be able to see more of what we put effort into. The idea is not to not put out effort, and to not take the actions towards the things that you think are good matches for you, but just to also know that there's a lot of, energetic interference at the moment, so you may not get the kind of results, that you would in other times. And I love hearing that, because man, to find out that it's not your fault, but I'm doing all the things. I'm lighting the candles, and I'm doing the prayers, and I'm listening to the YouTube manifestation meditations, and, and blah, blah, this, and nothing's happening. And then there's this, thing of divine time, which works not only on a universal level, but also on a personal level, that is, you pray for 10 years for something, you never get it, you want to give up. And you can, because guess what? You'll get it or you won't. If it's yours, it'll come to you. And I don't know. There's all these different ranges of belief systems. And one of the things that I go back to, I have PTSD, and whenever I hear people being like, well, you have to think positively. If you think positively, then positive things will happen. And I'll be like, yeah, but my brain is broken. I have really bad depression, and to tell me to buck up, it makes me just want to punch them.
Right.
And at some point, there are folks out there who started making the connections to the folks who have chronic illnesses, and it affects their mood. And, you can't, they're like, oh, just be grateful. Count the things that you're grateful for. Well, if the first thing that comes to mind because you have really bad depression is, well, it's one more day I don't have to live through again before I die, you can't be angry at that person. It's not, they're not choosing to be depressed, right? So I always want to make that clarification that it's, for some people, it can be a switch that you turn on and off, and it's great to rewire your brain and to rework your brain so that you can receive all the things, blah, blah, this. But there's a lot of folks out there who were born with brains that just don't work that way, and I want them to be all taken off the hook right now. It's not your fault. You can rewire your brain, but it's going to be way more complicated. You're going to need help doing it. there are pathways to getting your brain into a state of repair where those kinds of things are going to be available to you. But like, don't be angry at yourself if you can't get out of a depression, that you can't manifest a cure, for depression or, terrible anxiety, etc. So that's my second or my third rant for this evening or this morning.
Well, I think that's great, and I'm glad you reminded us about depression. I mean, I'm sure everybody's gone through some level of it in their lifetime. So, I have a lot of compassion for people. I'm just kind of hardwired that way, but I'm also an Aries, so I'm like, just go. That works that doesn't even work for me when when you get down, you're down. Like
when you get down, you're down. And
yeah, you got to allow yourself that whatever you're learning from that. I mean, you can learn from every experience. It's not like we have to be ready to party all the time. I certainly can't. Yeah. And, I can't speak.
When you were facing down mortality, if that affected you, that's okay.
Right.
And it was a situational thing. And now on the far side of it, then you get to look at it how you choose to look at it.
Yeah.
As opposed to
rewriting,
the things, the very human things that happen when we're faced with something like that. Like getting mad at somebody who's like, I don't know, been in a home invasion and they can't calm down and they can't sleep in that home anymore, and they don't trust anything and they're constantly looking out the windows, and you're like, get over it. No, this person has experienced trauma. It's going to take more than just being like, well, you're not being robbed now, so what's the problem? The body says they are. Mm-hmm. Same thing with, I think, getting, a cancer diagnosis or any big medical thing. There's lots and lots to weed through, and you were traumatized. And hopefully
I was.
You got lots of support around it, and now, you can look at it differently.
Yeah, it's in the rear view mirror. It was a long time ago. So, knock on wood, I'm really healthy and I got through it. But also, I feel like I learned so much from it. Like, I'm a stronger individual from my experience. And I think I was meant to go through something like that to learn something, to figure out, to weed through relationships and figure out what's really important in life. I mean, it does make you prioritize everything.
People, have that response where they have a cancer scare or, whatever, we're just using cancer for the moment. But, and they look at their life differently on the far side. That's awesome.
It is. I mean, I would have wasted so much time. I mean, looking back, I who knows? But I have to ask you, so I just read The Alchemist for the first time. Mm-hmm. Have you ever read that? Mm-mm. Oh my God, Trai, you have to read this book. So it has the 4 levels of, I don't remember what they call it, like the things you have to go through in order to reach your goal. Like everyone has their personal legend, which is really just you're here to just to find your purpose. What's your purpose? I was looking at my little notes here to see how they phrased it. Your purpose, they call it a personal legend. And it's really interesting because they talk about beginner's luck, and all the doors open up. And then and then there's love, which is the people who surround you who are going to say, why are you going on this journey? It's so stupid. Why are you going to become a writer? That's dumb. I can write. Anybody can write. Why would you want to be a writer? And then you go through this crazy, door slamming adventure where nothing works for a really long time. And then finally, and that's the third one. And then finally, when you're about to go right across the finish line, you either make a ton of mistakes or you have all the self-doubt and give up right before the finish line. So I'm here to tell you, we're all on a journey. We're all on a path. But I actually wanted to ask you, not tell you something. Have you ever been able to decipher your own purpose or other people's purpose with your gifts and talents of being a psychic? Is that something that you were able to do or you're sensitive to?
Question. So, okay, so being a person with PTSD and being raised in the household that I was raised in, the concept of purpose, I was raised by two narcissistic parents, which means that my purpose was to be of service to them. I didn't exist. There was no Trai. There was only go get me this, go do that. So it took a really, 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 really long time to find a person in all of that. But what I took forward was the coping mechanism, which is, be of service, be of service, be of service. Worked when I was a kid. I guess it'll work as an adult. And I go back and forth for myself being like, well, am I actually a person of service, or is this just childhood programming? And the answer is I don't know. And frankly, at this particular point, I'm kind of over it. And because the thing that I like best how do I put this? The thing that resonates the most with me is purpose is a great way to spend your time in a constructive manner while you're here. But wouldn't it just be sorry, I cussed. Wouldn't it just
You can say fucking on my show.
Wouldn't it just be fucking great if just the fact that you woke up and you're breathing, isn't that enough? For goodness sakes. Isn't it just enough that you're here? I like that because letting go of feeling like I need to pour every single thing about me and about, my skills, whatever those are, into making bolstering up other people, is exhausting. And it would just be neat if I could just chill out and go, I don't know, swim in a swimming pool for a year and do nothing. And have that be okay too.
Right. I guess what I'm getting
self-care.
at...
My purpose is self-care. No, I mean, nothing.
Self-care is important. I'm really bad at that.
Chase
I gotta
the
work
capitalistic machine, to not generate income, to not, make sure everybody's okay, to not keep building the businesses, to do all the things. It would be neat if I could just go swimming every day and, I don't know, sit in the sun.
Yeah, you're right. It does put a lot of pressure on people to say, what is your life's goal? Like, what were you born to do in this lifetime? It's like, well, I don't know. But
love and be loved. There you go.
On the other hand, I think that if you go by, and I'm no expert, but if you go by what it is that makes you happiest,
sure,
then you kind of are hitting on all of those things, right? Because you're not doing something because you feel like you have to. It's because that's what resonates. So whatever makes you happy, that's what you should do. Like, you're like a super amazing screenwriting teacher and coach, and you're in. I haven't read anything that you've written, but you've written a lot.
I have. But I want to go back to that point that you're making. I think that the idea of be happy is also, I find that a really privileged stance. For some people, it's just getting through that day.
Sure.
That, this idea of choosing what they get to do for work is,
right,
not necessarily available to them. Mm-hmm. And I think it puts just a ton of pressure on the folks that are struggling, to chase your bliss. That's not an option for so around the world. Around the world, it is not an option for the vast majority of people. So I don't necessarily feel like that's a pathway. If you can find some joy in every day, that would be cool, but not everybody can. But then we shouldn't make them feel bad.
No, I know. That's what I said. It's a lot of pressure. But I also think that it's I think that we all kind of deserve to have a moment where we do the things that make us happy, even if it's the most mundane, looking at cat videos or whatever, to just kind of chill out and be able to get ready for the next day. I mean, we've all been in those situations where we had a grind of a life, and I'm older, so I'm kind of looking at doing the things that I have the privilege of being able to fill my days with what I want to do, but it wasn't always like this.
Right.
And so anyway,
so that's
it's kind of
the purpose, I would say, at this moment for you is like to go do the things you want to do because you can.
Right.
Oh my God, embrace that.
Right.
Embrace
exactly.
that. I think about, like, I have a number of friends who are doctors who will spend part of their year abroad doing pro bono surgeries for, kids with cleft palates, or one of my friends is a doctor beyond border person, so he'll go into war zones and spend a few months, and none of that stuff makes them happy, but it's the thing that's important to them. So whatever the value is, right? Whatever they place their value into, then that. So maybe that's a better, for me, way to look at it is, well, what do you value? And the more you can put emphasis on that. So for some people, it's not going to be that, that they can quit their jobs, and they have multiple jobs or whatever. It's that they feel best when they're, I don't know, hanging out with their family.
That's
then
right.
Maybe that's the thing,
Right.
that like what you're talking about is to try to make that a priority in their life.
Yeah, and I think I'm short. Every day is different. Every week is different. We just need to take care of ourselves. But I think that's the hardest thing for me is put myself first. And that's, I think it comes from being a mom of 2 kids. And you just kind of, I was always super independent, and then boom. But just takes a little bit of time for yourself. Okay, Susie's giving you a homework assignment for this week. Put yourself first, at least for a few minutes a day. Go do something for yourself that you wouldn't normally do. And you might feel better by the end of the week. Who knows what that might be. So nice to have this chat with you today, Trai.
Always
I really
good to talk to you.
enjoyed talking with you. This is our second interview. Check out our first interview. It's a real eye-opener. Great. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today. We really appreciate you and your gifts and talents. It's always a pleasure.
Well,
thank you for coming to the Wild Side.
And I'm so glad that the banger is out of your house.
Yes, thank you.
Production and musical score of The Wild Side by Kelly Lindau. Visit my website at susielindau.com. Follow me on Facebook and Instagram, or tweet me about the show at Susie Lindau, and I'll follow you back. If you enjoyed The Wild Side, be sure to tell your friends, family, or anyone who will listen. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. Thanks so much for listening.